Hello, everyone. Welcome to Automation Hour. If you're joining us for the first time, all lines will be muted. Please post any questions that you have related to Parker's presentation or any general process automation question to our Trailblazer community Salesforce Automation Hour. So sometime after the session, we will post the link to the recording as well as the deck out on our website, automationhour.com, as well as our Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour. And if you haven't registered for our sessions for the rest of the year, we're fully booked out. So please join us for our other sessions. We have some returning NVPs coming to present and some people who are just really passionate in the community about automation. I do want to highlight October 23rd. So that is Rakesh is coming back, our co-host, to present. So definitely sign up for that if you could attend. If not, you can always access the recordings after the fact. And we can't bring this free webinar series to you without our sponsor, Concrete.io. So thank you very much. And here are your co-hosts, myself, Rakesh, and David. And we continue to miss seeing everyone in real life, and hopefully sometime soon we can get together again. All right, so Parker is back again. This is probably the third one, I think, that you presented this year. So we love having Parker come back and share his experience. And this time around, he's going to talk about creating and managing users in the community. So with that, I will hand it over to Parker.
Okie doke.
You have control.
All righty, y'all can see my PowerPoint? Coolio. All right.
Yeah.
Well, so y'all know me. My name's Parker Edelmann. Been doing the automation hour a few times. So as Jen mentioned, this is my third time on the show this year, fourth time in total. I've been doing Salesforce consulting for over 2 years now, mostly in a freelance capacity. I've got 11 certifications under my belt, including the Salesforce Application Architect certification. So my knowledge is pretty deep and pretty broad along most areas of the Salesforce platform. Even presented on Dreamforce 19 on how to get those certifications. So if you want to get more certifications quickly, go check that out. Been to San Francisco, made it to the Ohana floor of the Salesforce Tower. That's floor 61. They say that at floor 62, you're in the cloud. I do a lot of automation around Salesforce. Flows, process builders, workflows, approvals. It's kind of my strong suit, and so I've kind of taken a liking to building those, and you know, just thought I'd share, and that's why I'm here on Automation Hour. Another fun fact is I am indeed a board game enthusiast, so whether it be chess or more modern titles like Pandemic or other things, you know, I don't mind taking a nice thinky game and enjoying that. You can find me on LinkedIn there, and you can see my Trailblazer profile there as well, and so that's how you can get in contact with me. Today we will be talking about creating community users from a flow. What we're going to do today is go over creating a wizard from flow that will end up creating community users. This will allow your users to manage themselves and in a very elegant way. Manage access to whatever communities it is that you have, and take a little bit of the administrative burden off yourself. So what we're going to go over today is we're going to provide a little bit of background. There's a lot of communities set up that we need to go over in order to provide a bit of context to make this thing work, and just lay some groundwork with some other configuration that needs to take place on the Salesforce platform. After that, we're going to take a look at the flow. We're going to do a little deep dive on that and figure out what makes a nice, elegant experience, how to make it configurable, and really just what to do to provide your users the best experience in the flow. So, and then there's also a few gotchas that you might encounter when trying to do this. So there's a few extra steps we need to take to make sure it all works for the community. Plus, not only can we create a user from a flow, we can also create contacts, as you know. And we can do that in the same flow. So I'll show you how to upgrade it from just creating user to also creating contacts. And then after we're all done, we will have some question and answers. And after we're done with that, feel free to ask me anything, Salesforce related or otherwise. Now then, as far as Q&A, we will have a few good stopping points along the way to ask questions. So please do put your questions in the chat, and we will get around to them at good times to stop. And so let's get on with the presentation. All right. So why is it that you might want to provide a custom wizard? Salesforce does out of the box have an interface whereby community users can manage themselves, and that's great. But there are a couple different reasons you might want a custom wizard, and it all kind of comes down to that look and feel thing. Honestly, I personally think that having a custom wizard to guide your users through it is quite elegant, and it makes a good impression upon the users. You also have a lot more control over it. It's very customizable. You can, change the text. You can change what fields get populated. You can create other things, tasks, and so on. I've also seen some people will brand their flows with company images using certain image components in the flows, and so you can do that. You can also personalize the experience to include the name of the company that is accessing your portal, the name of the users, the name of the people you're trying to create, and just guiding users through that process is a really, really nice kindness to show to your users. You can also do things that are perhaps specific to your own use cases that you'd like to go through when you have your users create themselves. So let's get a little bit into the demo here and let's walk through this. So I have a community set up, and first of all, you're obviously going to need to enable communities. So let's take a look at this in the builder. So I got a very, very basic community here. This is just out of the box, don't have any branding on it. But what we're going to do is we have the account management page. We have on here a flow component, and then we have the account management related list. Also, there's this nice little branding tab that does some other stuff, but we won't be talking about that today. If I go to preview as an authenticated user, we will, let's see, I don't have that there. If I go in as a primary user, the user that will be able to manage this, oopsie, if I click login as community user, we can see how that interface looks. So first things first, I have my flow up here. And then down below, I have all the members where I can manage the permissions and access levels. I can reset the password or manage permissions, can play with some of the settings here. Now, I will take a moment to show you what the out-of-the-box interface looks like. And I believe this might be somewhat customizable, but you got, most of your first name, last name, email, standard stuff, but you also have some stuff that you might not necessarily want to present your users with, like alias, nickname, username, and contact. You also have this profile. What is a profile supposed to mean? What does that allow? You have to either provide a descriptive name for it at maybe the expense of internal user management, or you just kind of have to expect them to kind of know what that means. You also have time zone, locale. What in the world is locale for? You got email encoding. That's not necessarily something that you want to present your users with. Chatter. If your community doesn't use chatter, this section is completely pointless. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why you might want to do a custom wizard. So let's take a look at this here. I have some custom things set up here. One of the things that you might want to do is meter the amount of users that your community can create. And one of the requirements that we had when I built this for was that there would only be 10 contacts, give or take, at a given account. They also want to track how many that they had used and how many they had remaining. And that again is something that we wanted to display to the user when they went to go and create the context. And so this is actually some automation that's managed via triggers. We won't get into that today. Next up, we have the contacts that we can then grant access to. So we have not only the name, but we also have the email. And if they have a title, we're also providing the title here. And if they don't see the person they want to add, they can go to the contacts tab and create them there. In this case, it would be the accounts tab. But let's just say that we want to create a contact that already exists, or a user for a contact that already exists in the system. We already have their email, we already have their title. We really just need to find the access level they get. We can also specify a time zone if we like. I happen to live in Texas, so I'm on Central Time, so I'm going to pick Central Daylight Time. Go next. And it's going to throw an error. This is one of the gotchas that we have in our flow. If we go back and try and debug this as a authenticated user, we're going to find that we have access to the profile ID. And so we're just going to do that real quickly. I'm going to log out for now as our primary user. And we're going to go back to the account and get the ID. This is really all that we need for the ID. This is the only parameter that this automation expects. So we'll debug that. We'll pass in the account ID. We'll run this. Let's try this again as a system administrator. This time we'll need to provide a title. It's optional here. Again, I'll provide a time zone. You know, that's positive. I don't want Central Daylight Time. Next. And voila. So it's obviously a permissions issue. For some reason, we don't have access to get to the profile ID. And the solution for that I will present later, but let's take a look at the flow here and take a look at what all it is that we're doing. First thing we need to know is make sure that we have an account ID. And we have this little variable account ID. And if it starts with 001, we can be confident of two things. A, it has a value. And B, not only does it have a value, but it's the correct value and it's an account ID. All account IDs start with 001. So we can be pretty sure that it's an account ID. If not, we're going to take a different path. If we don't get an account ID, usually means something has gone wrong. And as you can see, I have here a formula put in as the display text. And I've called this label no account error. Let's take a look at this. This is actually a custom label that I've configured in the back end, so that way, whenever the business wants to change any of the text, they know where to go. And I've prefixed all my custom labels that I use in this flow with portal user wizard _ That way they know what labels pertain to this portal user wizard and can modify any of the text at will and very easily. So let's say we do get an account ID though. We'll proceed and we're going to try and find the account in the system. We're going to want to get the fields that we're going to display to our users, so we're going to need to query those here. I like, whenever I query records, to do the choose fields and let Salesforce do the rest, so that way I don't query all the fields. There's probably a performance impact to selecting all the fields, so I just want to get the ones that I need here. If we do have an error, then getting the account, then we throw an error message here. Now then, if they don't have any available contacts, then we don't want to let them create a user. So if the remaining support contacts is greater than 0, we'll let them pass. But if not, they get another screen, basically saying, all right, you've used up all of your contacts that you have. You've got 10 out of 10 here, and so you're gonna need to get in touch with the business in order to get more. However, if we do find that they do have some contacts that they can use and create new users for, then we're going to find all the contacts that we'd like to give. So in this case, the customer had a field called no longer there. And if this field was true, then obviously the contact has left the company and they shouldn't be given the option to create a user for them. Also, if they already have access to Salesforce or to the community, then obviously they should not be displayed here. And so this is actually a lookup field to the user in question. And we set that via another automation on the user object whenever a user is created. And so we're setting this to true, or we're checking if it is null, and if it is, great. If it's not, then we don't want to show that. And then of course we're sorting by first name, getting all the records that we find, and all we need is first name and name. We also want to make sure that we do find some contacts before we end up displaying this to our users. If they don't have any contacts, then they're going to get another message. And so we have a decision for that. If count of contacts is greater than 0, we'll proceed as normal. Otherwise, they're going to get a message saying, hey, you don't have anyone that you can activate in the support portal. And so I got another custom label for that. And so that basically tells them that they need to go and create another contact. Now, and here's where the magic really starts to happen. So once again, we got our little nicety that we display to the user, and then we have a record choice for our radio buttons. So what this does, if we go to our record choice set, we have our collection of eligible contacts. Again, we have to do a little query here. We found this information earlier, but I couldn't find a way to display the contacts and radio button without doing another query, so this is what I did. Obviously, we want to make sure that you get the account ID, that they're still at the company, and that they don't already have access. Again, we're going to sort it. And if you notice, not only did we display the name, we also displayed the email and the title. And in the back end, this is actually a user formula, or this is a formula on contact object. Again, this is configurable by the business. If you have an admin who knows enough about what they're doing, then they can change this formula at will. As a fun fact, whenever I showed this to the client in question that I built this for, they immediately wanted to take out one of these sections here, and so we just did that. And what this basically says, we want to show the first name if there is one, we want to show the last name if there is one, also the email and the title. We're also going to get the contact's ID when we do this. We're also going to take a few other fields. We're going to get the email address, the first name, the last name, and the title. These will be important, obviously, when we go to create our user. Next, we're going to gather the details, the remaining details that we need. So a little nicety where it says basically, all right, we need a few more details in order to create your given contact. So obviously, if we don't have a first name, we're going to need a first name. So I've required this. And if we do have a first name though already from the contact, then there's no point in showing this. So I've set up the component visibility to say that if first name is null, global constant true, just to only display when the first name is null. I've done the same for the email. Email is obviously the most important field because that's going to fuel our username. It's also going to fuel a few other things. So we need to make sure that we get the email. This is required. But if we already have one, then no need to bother to get one. We have our component visibility set, so that way if the email is null, then it displays, otherwise it doesn't. Same thing with title. And then again, we have another choice that defines which level of access that they get. And each level of access is its own profile that I have in Salesforce. Each of these choices represent a profile, obviously. And if we drill into one of these choices, let's say basic, for instance, again, I have this label value. And if we look again at it, one step deeper, label base profile, it's a formula with a custom label. If I go back to the choice, I have a choice value set to the basic profile ID. And this, again, is another formula that gives me the 18-character ID of the basic portal profile from the custom labels section. We're also getting the time zone here. Next, we just have to create the user. I like to create my records in an assignment variable before putting them into a create records element. So we're just going to get the account ID, contact ID, the email, name. We're going to flag the user as being portal enabled, and so we got to mark that as true. Last name, profile ID, we got that from our access level choice. We got the title, we got the email, the time zone. We are going to assume that the locale is English US in this case, but you could set that dynamically. Email encoding, we are also assuming to be UTF-8. Language locale key, we're also assuming that the user is going to want to see it in English. Alias is actually a formula that we have, and this is basically just a rehash of the first and last name, nothing special. And then also I have another field that's actually a little bit out of place. I have profile text underscore underscore C. I'll explain that in a sec. Now we finally create our record. We're going to create one record, use all variables from a record, user, nothing special. If we run into an error, we display an error screen, and this time we're also giving the flow.fault message. If an error does happen, then we get a really nasty error message like this if a community user does receive an error. It's even more worthless than a regular process builder or flow error in that it gives you no details except for get code that really shouldn't be there anyways. There is a real error, and there is something that can be done about it. Go to the success screen, we just show them the label saying, hey, you created your user. So how do we, let's pause for questions here if we have any. I don't see any in the questions panel, but I'll give everyone a minute to catch the breath and maybe fire a question or two.
I just checked the Trailblazer community and we don't see any new questions there either.
No questions there either. All right. So if everyone's good, then I will move on. So the next part that the way that we can resolve that error is if we go back. I actually created a before save flow to help with that profile ID. I have this populate profile ID flow. This triggers whenever a record is created before the record is saved on the user object. And we're going to take a look and see if that profile text underscore underscore C custom field is populated. If it is not populated, we're going to assume it's just an internal user creating something and there's no reason to proceed. But if it is populated, we have the profile ID that we're going to set to profile text underscore underscore C. So we go back, we will save this, just make some changes or something. All right, we activate this, and now we try it as a community user. We will be met with success. Go back to account management. You have another contact left. Great. Just going to select something, don't particularly care. A new user has been created. So what was going on is the community users don't have access to the profile ID. By setting that through something that runs in system mode, we're able to circumvent that restriction and thereby populate the profile ID. And now that we have that, we have our user that shows up, and life is good. The user will have received an email for our welcome email settings. And so I now have a welcome email, and the user can then log in using their link that they get sent. So let's say we want to take it a step up though. Let's say we want to be able to create a contact or whatever in the same process, or maybe when we want to do something else. So I'm going to go back to automation hour. We'll create another contact just so I can use that later. Alrighty, so now we have another contact. We can try another experiment. So not only do I have one flow here, if I go back, I have another version of this flow, create portal user wizard. Oops, I want to go to details and versions, where we've changed a few things. So I will open this, and we've made another change to this screen. Not only do we have one choice, but I'm now offering a choice to create a new contact. And first we're going to see if contact select equals new contact, which is the value of the choice that I just inserted. If they select that, our choice will be equal to new contact, and then we'll know to create a new contact. Otherwise, the ID that we find should start with 003, and therefore we're going to want to take that existing contact and create a user for it. I've basically just cloned this field here, this screen here, and just taken off all of the component visibilities, and now it's all visible all the time. So the reason for that is we obviously don't have any of the information, so we kind of need to gather all of that. We'll take a moment to prepare our contact for inserting it. We'll give it an account ID, first name, last name, email, and title. We will create our contact and then take a moment to get some of our variables ready for creating a user off of it. This is the same assignment that we had earlier. I've just modified some of the variables to work with both being creating contact and our original process here. So I've done the same thing here, just cleaned up some variables and formulas, and that's all fine and dandy. Create our user as normal, give them the same success screen, same user error. So let's activate this, and let's give it a whirl. So we now have a new choice here. You can see all the support contacts that we've already used and created. So we got a new contact. It's going to ask us for the first name and the last name, of course. Don't really care about the time zone here. Next. Okay, didn't like my alias. And voila, it creates a new user. Now, one of the things that I was expecting when I built this flow was a mixed DML error between the create contact and create user step. So usually when you create or do DML on a non-setup object and then a setup object such as a user, you can expect an error. In this case, I didn't get one, which kind of surprised me. If you ever do get an error like that in a screen flow, there is a component out there from unofficial Salesforce that will bypass this and basically close the transaction after you create a contact and then start a new one before you create the user, thereby avoiding the mixed DML. So I have that here, I believe, yep. And we have the link to that in the description of that slide. And so I believe that concludes the demo here. I believe that's pretty much it. So I will pass it back to you, Jen, and we will start some Q&A.
All right, so as a reminder for folks, if you have a question about something in Parker's presentation or any general process automation question, please either post them to the chat or to our Trailblazer community Salesforce automation hour. So I'll just give folks a few minutes.
And then don't be afraid to ask, a non-automation related question as well. Some people are interested in other things as well. So we can do a little office hours here. Ask me about certification.
Ask me anything.
Yeah, ask me anything. Certification, going from admin to consultant, all kinds of stuff. Alrighty, so we do have some questions coming in here. Can detail page buttons be used to pass IDs to flows? The answer to that question is yes. So in order to do that, we will go in Salesforce, we'll try and create a new button here. And let's say, oops, I don't want any action. I want a button. So each flow has its own URL. So if I wanted to launch this flow, for instance, from there, I would take this URL and we'd give that a label. Content source, we're going to give that a URL. This is going to be a detail page button. We'll put this here. Then we're going to type a question mark, and then we're going to specify our account ID. Then we're going to equal sign and then put in whatever merge variable it is that we want. And so, do I have an account ID? Where am I? One contact. Why do I not have account ID? I should have account ID somewhere. Whatever. Okay, maybe I got renamed or something. But anyways, you can pass an ID in here or whatever, and then that will pass. Obviously, we need a name here, but that's how we would do that. All right. If that answers your question, then great. Okay. Oh, see, as a follow-up to that, can't seem to make yours work. Maybe, post a kind of example of what you're doing, maybe the URL text here, and maybe troubleshoot that. I'm sure this question has, okay, so we got another question from Elias Sanchez. I'm sure this question has been posted before, but can you go over how you created the fall error screen in your flows? Yes, I can. So let's pull up Flow Builder. So let's delete all the connections here. There are only certain types of elements that have fault elements. So whenever you drag an element for the first time, it's going to give out one of its valid connector paths. You'll notice here that you have another connector that you can do. If you connect to something else, it becomes a fault element. This works for any DML operations, create, update, delete. This also works for your get records element. Also, wait elements and actions also have a fault path that you can do. All right. Next, great solution. This is from Dominic. Great solution, Parker. You mentioned custom field to show if access was granted on the contact record was part of another automation. Could you touch on it? I saw the global constant in your flow, but is there more to it? Do you have something similar to remove that value if the user is inactivated? Okay, so part one, yes, it is in get eligible contacts here. We have portal access granted is null true. Basically, if this field has not been set, then we can assume that there is no user created for it. If we go into the back end, I don't necessarily want to show the class here, but I do have an Apex trigger that on user create, we update the contact with the user ID into that field. And to answer your question, no, we do not have an automation to remove that value if the user is inactivated. If we go in here and we decide that we want to deactivate one of these community members, they continue to show up here and we could then reactivate them there. So that's why I don't have an automation to remove that. If that answers your question, let us know. Next, we have a question from Heidi. Hi, is there any advantages or disadvantages to creating a record triggered flow versus creating an auto launch flow, no triggered, that gets invoked from a process builder, if that is how an auto launch flow would be used? Yes, there are. So let's go over what is available to us. We have before save flows, after save flows, and process builders that can trigger flows. Process builders that trigger flows is what admins know and love, and these basically just do DML, SOCWL, etc., and have familiar properties. Before save flows are kind of like before save triggers. These do not do DML, but if I pull up our before save flow that I had, instead we actually just assign some variables that actually change the values on the record. So if I pull in here, I'm changing the profile ID just by setting it through an assignment. And so there is a huge performance gain when you use a before save flow when applicable. Now, to know about a before save flow is that they are still, in my opinion, missing a few features there. So you don't necessarily know when certain values have changed. So you have to be very careful with your criteria when using them. After save flows are very similar to what you would expect from Process Builder plus a auto launch flow. The catch is that with after save flows, the record triggered flows, is you don't have access to functions like is new or is changed. However, this is changing in the winter release, and we don't have the release notes out to my knowledge yet, but go check that out once they do come out, because then you can get workflow type criteria on there. So if that answers your question, Heidi, let us know.
What I'm going to do is post out the link to the Salesforce Architect Decision Guide, and this talks specifically about triggered automation and when to use before save and after save and whatnot. So
good. I wasn't aware of that document.
It's relatively new.
Okay.
Yeah, and it goes pretty into detail on all the things you should consider and what happens with DML actions and all that. So
sweet, awesome, that'd be a great resource. So next question we have is from Chris that I see. Can flows display lookup fields? Can flows create new records by copying existing records and copy only specific field data points? Okay, so a bit of a complicated question, so let's back this up. Can flows display lookup fields? And let me just double check that here. I think
Yes,
The
it
answer
can.
is yes. So we do have a lookup component. This is a little bit finicky. If you need more power than what the standard component provides, there is a custom component out there by unofficial SF or someone else that provides more power than just the lookup. TM-flows create new records by copying existing records. Yes, they can. And copy only specific field data points. Yes, they can. So through a mix of assignments, formulas, and lookups, you can copy anything and everything that you want. So Chris, let us know if that answers your question or if you got a follow-up. Alrighty, so those are all the questions that I see in the chat as of right now. Autumn, if you want to post the link that you have and what's not working with it, we'd be more than happy to troubleshoot. Otherwise, I will pass it up to you, Jen, to see if there are any questions in the Trailblazer community.
I do see one.
Okay.
So the question is, what are your favorite resources for the non-programmer trying to learn to create flows? Specifically, where is a good explanation of the various resources and how to use them? For example, is null syntax, global, true variable, $record, $flow, etc.
Okay, so sounds like we've got some more of the finer points of flow. I didn't catch quite everything in the question, but as far as learning for flow out of the box, I definitely recommend Trailhead. They have some very good projects. No, here I want learn projects and ones that are tagged. Do I have a flow tag? No, they cleaned the tags on me. Okay. Let's go with flow. Yeah, automate business processes for recruiting app. That's pretty good. Word to cash process using, no, that's soft. Build a discount calculator. This one's really good. Build a simple flow is pretty good for those that are looking to learn. What else? What else? What else? What else? I think that's pretty much it there on the projects. So I do recommend Trailhead. If you're looking to learn some of the finer points, if you found that, you're no longer in the beginner space, then honestly, I think a good place to start would be to just start playing around with some of this stuff. We have in formulas our entire list of, global variables and whatever. We got flow thing, and they tell us generally what they're supposed to be. If you have questions about things, I definitely, recommend checking out the appropriate documentation or the release notes. There's been a lot that's coming out. For example, this active stages is pretty new. If you want to take advantage of stages, then there are release notes documentation on it that teaches it. If you want to learn formula syntax, honestly, just taking the advanced formulas module on Trailhead should teach you most of that. There are only a very few specific things that have to deal with flow, but if you can know and understand formulas, then you'll find that that knowledge translates very directly into flow. Does that kind of answer the question, Jen, or did I miss anything?
I believe so. And $record, just so you know, is the record that the flow is working with at the moment.
Right, right. So that's mostly done in before save flows and after save flows. Yeah, $record is the current record. It's also done in scheduled flows as well.
Yeah, yeah. And if you do want more resources for flow, in the flow builder in the upper right-hand corner where you see the question mark, if you do the drop down, you're able to get directly a Trailhead and the help and training docs or whatever.
Right.
Flow builder help or
And then here's my shortcuts. I need to learn all these. Okay, another question from Heidi. When doing a get records, there's no way to do an or in the conditions, right? As of this release, you are correct. However, in the next release, Pre-release
Yay.
or conditions in flow. So be looking forward to that. I know I am.
Winter 21.
Winter 21. There you go. Alrighty, so I did get the URL from Autumn here, and so I see that. Looks pretty good to me. It looks like we're trying to pass an ID into a variable here. If I pull up my example of the custom button, I see the /slow/flow name question mark variable name equals yada yada yada. So it looks correct from what I see, but if there's something specifically that's wrong with that, we can take a look at that. Jen, while we're giving Autumn a second there, do we have anything else in the Trailblazer community?
Let me just refresh. One thing, Autumn, just make sure your variable name is case sensitive, because I know sometimes that trips you up too. So
Ouch, okay.
it may or may not be the situation here. I do not see any additional questions posted. And there's a question about whether the recording will be shared. Yes, it will be. So sometime after the session, it will be posted out on our Trailblazer community, Salesforce Automation Hour, as well as our website, automationhour.com, and our YouTube channel, Salesforce Automation Hour.
Very good, very good. All right, I want to give that Trailblazer community one more check.
All right, and we're going to do last calls for any questions. Again, any questions?
Any questions?
Open.
Open mic. I'm going to check the Slack right here real quick.
So Autumn came back and said, my error says ID is null.
Huh. Well, okay, if the ID is null, I mean, obviously that can be one of a couple different things. Maybe the ID is just null on the record. Doesn't look like that's probably the case from what you're doing there. I would check to make sure that your variable is listed as available for input. So if I have let's see, I don't have any variables in this flow. Give me a variable, give me a variable, give me a variable. Oh my goodness. So I got the available for input checkbox here. It is available for input. Okay, sweet. If it's not, then it would be null. Most likely they're not saying ID in the update if it is ID null. Yeah, so I think we might need to take that one offline and take a look at it. If you're in the Ohana Slack, I'm there as well. Feel free to DM me or shoot us a message over LinkedIn. Alrighty. Sweet, contact on LinkedIn. All right, I'll be waiting for you there. So with that, I'll give one more chance for final questions. We'll refresh the Trailblazer community, and then we'll wrap this up.
I am not seeing any more questions in the Trailblazer community.
Okie doke. All right.
Looks like we're good here.
Sounds
Great.
like we're good.
All right,
Appreciate
well, Parker, thank you again for coming back 3 times this year to present.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Appreciate everyone participating in the chat and sending the questions.
And we look forward to you coming back in 2021.
2021. Okay, cool.
All
Yeah.
right.
Well, hopefully it won't be as crazy as 2020.
All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
All right. Catch you later. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.